Isolation is the enemy of excellence. I'm an introverted guy. I didn't understand that before, that I felt pride in going it alone, doing it myself. I can Google an article about how to tell my own story or develop a narrative. I can maybe shoot my own video. I'll figure it out. That's the enemy of excellence.
This is Create Your News, where business, branding, and relevance meet. I'm Craig Lucie, bringing you the strategies and stories to keep you ahead. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, and welcome to our Create Your News podcast. I'm Craig Lucie, and we are super excited to have our first guest, someone I've known for a couple of years, Chris Hanks. And to give you a little bit of background, he runs the Institute for Entrepreneurship. He's also the Entrepreneur in Residence for Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs. He's started different entrepreneurship programs at the University of Georgia as well as Kennesaw State University, and also run different programs and led programs at 22 different academic and corporate universities. Every time he speaks, I just want to listen, and I thought he would be a great guest for us today. So Chris, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. And thank you for that setup, because now I can just do nothing but disappoint.
No, I mean, the whole point of this podcast is really just giving people valuable information. Yeah. You and I were talking before the camera started rolling about like key takeaways. Yeah. And you're always helping entrepreneurs. And we want to talk about this first. You know, running these different programs, 22 different academic and corporate universities, you know, what sparked that passion for you to get involved?
Well, I was always I fell into entrepreneurship, not because I thought I was an entrepreneur, but just because I wasn't really fulfilled in what I was doing. My last corporate job was with Coca-Cola, and if you would have told me as a student at the University of Georgia that I would be at Coca-Cola someday, I think that was the dream job. But for some reason, I was in a bad mood about Saturday at 3 o'clock because the next day was Sunday, which meant the next day was Monday. And so it's like, there's got to be something more fulfilling. And hey, what if I did my own thing? And just following that calling and owning several small businesses. And that was about maybe, I think, creating a living and doing something that you found fun, but I didn't find meaning until I started guest speaking and teaching entrepreneurship and seeing the impact that it can have on people's lives. I really just fell in love with that.
And speaking of creating businesses, tell us about the first business that you created and what you learned from that experience.
Well, it depends on how you define first business. The business in college is just survival, like t-shirt business, delivery, service, right. Those kinds of things. So you learn how to survive and hustle. First real business was actually a franchise that I bought, which was a music store franchise. And so had music stores, and then that led to me having a recording studio, then a small entertainment business. And this is all before .com. And then the .com happened, and that's when I got a little bit more sophisticated as far as how do you raise money, how do you value businesses, those kinds of things happen really sort of like .com and after.
So how have those experiences shaped the way that you are going about teaching different entrepreneurs?
I think that we are changed through crucible experiences. Those experiences that change our sense of who we are and change our identity. And I think that learning and education should be experiential. Like, let's give them an experience. Because I used to get made fun of a lot for starting these entrepreneurship programs. It's a lot more common now. At the time it wasn't, but the idea was, well, you can't really teach entrepreneurship. It could be, but I kind of disagree, right? I can learn through experiences that change and alter who I am, right? Say, okay, well, hey, if you want to do your own thing, let me give you some steps to take. And we learn about ourselves through those steps, and maybe we become an entrepreneur, maybe we don't. I get criticized when I go into like middle schools, for example, because sometimes I think, hey, you're infusing entrepreneurship on young people. Well, that little girl who presents to me during a shrimp tank, because we call it shrimp tank, not Shark Tank because they're little, but that little girl who makes her cookies and presents, whether or not she's the next Mrs. Fields, I don't really care. But she's a better version of herself after she goes through that very difficult experience of presenting her dream, being asked hard questions from scary people like me, and seeing that change that happens within. Because one thing I've learned about entrepreneurship that I really am convicted on is that it's an inside game before it's an outside game. It's mindset over skill set. And I'd rather infuse a mindset of an entrepreneur. Let me own my position. Let me own my results. Let me own my part to play, whatever part I have, whether it's working for somebody or my own. That mindset is way more important than the skill set.
It's interesting that you mentioned Miss Fields, because we actually did a Lucie spotlight with Debbie Fields in our bigger studio over there.
Why am I not surprised by that? I'm so not surprised by that. I mean, that's...
And she was fantastic. I mean, the amount of energy that she had, and she would talk about being in her store and just ask a customer just to sing happy birthday with someone's birthday. She would interview her different employees and have them sing and really like push them to get outside of their comfort zone. And then she would take her cookies and just go out on the streets and give them away, because anybody can go out and bake cookies, but how's her cookie different?
Yeah.
And also she was creating that experience.
Yeah.
And she actually was told by the closest family members, don't do this, please. And it goes back to that mindset of, no, I'm going to do this. I know in my heart, this is what I need to be doing. And I know that people are going to eat what I'm selling in her case.
I think that doubt has killed more dreams than failure ever has. People are so afraid of failure, but it's doubt is a huge enemy. Like having the guts to do what she did, right? Hey, I made this, and I'm going to bring it into the world, and I'm going to scale it, right? That's a really hard thing to do. And the doubt and the voices inside of our head or the people in our lives and people who love us will say, yeah, that doesn't seem smart, and that's not a safe thing to do. And so we tend to stay within our comfort zones, and growth is always found outside of that, right? They're almost like those invisible fences we put in our yards to keep our dogs in the yard, right? Our dreams stay small sometimes because we're not inspired by a Mrs. Fields or other entrepreneurs, which is another reason why I love to put students in front of seasoned CEOs to show them that, hey, success is not reserved for the gifted. Success is reserved for the intentional, right? The committed. And hey, that person's not that smart, or maybe not that much smarter than I am. What that person did was that person was committed and, chose courage over that fear that we have, and chose faith over that doubt.
One of my favorite quotes ever is, and you talked about, dreading going to work on Monday at Coca-Cola. Yeah. And, I had spent a lot of time in news and bouncing around in different markets. But I just kind of thought, okay, I've done this. I think it's time for my next chapter. And the quote that I love to, and I say it to my team, it's nothing changes if nothing changes. Because so many people are talking about, well, I want to do this. Here's why I want to pursue this particular business. Well, it's great. You're going to have your naysayers, but nothing will change if nothing will change. So you got to just go out and do it. But you have seen people go out, do it. Maybe they failed. Maybe they've grown it into a Fortune 500 company. What are some of the barriers that you're seeing when people are trying to get their business off the ground?
Well, I mean, there's so many, but maybe I'll start with that theme that you were just tying into, the fear of change, right? I think that's the scariest Halloween costume we could possibly have, right? Just get a t-shirt with the word change because it scares us. I don't want to change. But healthy things grow, growing things change. We have to change, right? But that's so hard because that means I have to get outside my comfort zone. I have to learn new skills. I have to work hard to do that because I've got these natural limitations that I'm struggling with. And the person who leads the $1 million venture is not the same person who could lead the $10 million venture. And so I have to become a different version of me. That's really hard. You're asking people who are growing in an aggressive growth company, you're asking people to go from nothing, to go from nothing to something, and from something to something great. That is a roller coaster of change. And that's really hard and uncomfortable, right? And so we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Hey, I'm not comfortable right now, but
I'm not either.
So, we just got to say, okay,
I'm comfortable having this conversation, but just in business in general, it's just like the constant feeling of pressure. Yeah. And, there's the payroll aspects of things, like we've got to continue to grow this business and get more clients and things like that. So how do you consult different entrepreneurs to really try to encourage them to get back to why they started the business? let the stress is going to come naturally with anything in life. How do you coach them to get past that?
Again, multitude of answers. One of the areas that you could start in is simplicity. Because as we grow, things get more complex. But complexity kills growth. That's why great leaders simplify. Because like if I feel like I got 100 things to do, I feel stressed. And even if they're all small things, right? Versus, hey, there's a lot of things going on, but here's the most important thing. And as long as I make progress on the most important thing that moves my business the farthest, the fastest, I'm going to sleep okay tonight. Yes, I wish I would have gotten more done, or I wish this would have gone better than it did, but at least I did this. So what if we could simplify? Because we confuse activity with accomplishment. And what's weird about entrepreneurship is you don't make much money being the doer of the thing that you do. And you think that growth means doing more. And it's not doing more. It's actually doing less, but less of the important things. CEO stands for Chief Executive Officer, not everything officer, right? And so every quarter, my job should get a little bit smaller than it was before. But I need to do, like with that additional time and energy, I need to focus on more important things, bigger things, things that change the business for the better more, right? Versus the fun things. Well, I used to like to go see clients. Well, maybe it's not wise for you to see every client anymore. What if you spent that time growing your business? What would that mean? What would that look like? So simplicity. In fact, Dan Sullivan says that a business can't scale until it reaches a new state of simplicity. And I like that phrase. Like, so what does simple look like for us? Because growth gets, and we tend to think growth is going to solve the problem. As we grow, well, revenue should grow, right? No, growth sucks cash. And actually, and cash flow can't keep up with revenue growth. And so that's a reason why 67% of the Inc. 5000 list 5 years ago is no longer in business, right? Growth can be dangerous. So what we need to do is simplify and focus on the important, which is a really easy thing to say and a very hard thing to do, and fire ourselves from the things that matter less, or stop being a firefighter. You know, firefighters make bad entrepreneurs. If I'm always getting up every day and fighting fires, I'm not moving the business forward. I'm not leading. I'm just putting out fires. And that'll keep that treadmill going. I'm just on this constant treadmill.
Well, that theme of simplicity can translate to so many different things. You know, we as journalists, because in our company, we focus on positive storytelling. And we always say that we want to humanize your business by creating compelling content that will resonate with your core audience. 3 questions: what are you trying to say? Who are you trying to say it to? What do you want them to do? And as trained storytellers, you know, our producers and news directors in the newsroom would always tell us the KISS rule. And KISS stands for keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Please just keep it simple. Because mom or dad, if they're in the kitchen cooking and the kids are running wild, they might not even be watching the story, but they're listening. So you can't have a complex story to something. But then you look at companies, let's look at Nike. They started with a running shoe, and then they expand it, and then they're Nike today, and they have apparel and everything else. How do they go from with a running shoe, which is simple, but then they're pretty complex now? What's your take on that?
Again, the problem with somebody like me who's nerdy about entrepreneurship, there's always I always want to come up with 12 answers to a simple question. So again, I got so many answers running through my head. But the idea of you dream big, you start tiny, you scale carefully. That's a Guy Kawasaki quote, right? Like so it may be just a running shoe, but I see more, right? I like that Thoreau quote, it's not what we look at, it's what we see. Is you may see just a small business in a basement, and you may see just a guy who's just, surviving paycheck to paycheck, but I see something greater. I see more impact. And so the idea that I can start small, but then I am going to be very intentional about my growth, and I have a vision. I have a picture of the future that produces passion within me. And so I'm going to show up like we're not just a running shoe. I'm going to show up every day and start acting. It's easier to act our way into a new behavior than think our way into a new behavior. And there's a lot of criticisms that I get for the work that I do, and one of them that I've heard feedback from is one that I'm unapologetic for, unapologetic about, is I overuse the word CEO. But I do that intentionally because some of the people that we are a home for don't view themselves as CEOs. They think, well, that's only for the public company, the Coca-Colas and that kind of thing. It's like, no, you may be only at 2 million in revenue, whatever it is, but you're going to be at 20 million and you're going to be at 200 million. And we have to have an identity that corresponds with that. And I want you to start thinking like a CEO. What would a CEO do in this? I know what a doer would do, but you don't get paid for what you do. You get paid for what you can grow, right? And so how would a CEO react to this situation? Because at the smaller levels, we've got really two businesses to run, and which really stinks. We got to run the business of today, and then we also have to run the business of tomorrow. And that's really hard. We don't have the luxury of just focusing on the future. It's like, well, I've got to get stuff done today, and I've got to do both. That's a really tough tension to manage through.
Great answer. I was taking some notes right there. like I said earlier, I'll just listen. For those that don't know, that who are listening, watching, you've worked in leadership teams with UPS, McKinsey. Explain to everybody what separates the good entrepreneurs or the good CEOs from the great ones.
Another disclaimer, so many answers. Top of mind, lifelong learners. I think knowledge is a barrier to growth, right? Like there's sometimes when I feel like I've been doing this for a long time, therefore I kind of know leadership, and I don't think I can learn anything from you. I don't think I can grow in those areas because I've got 20 years of experience. That kind of attitude versus having a sense of wonder and really being open to what am I not seeing? What could I be doing better? That hunger, that desire to learn to be better, I think separates the great ones from the good ones. Because we tend to be limit our own potential and our own growth by thinking that, hey, I know it all, versus, hey, I want to be a learn it all, right? And one of the things that I find interesting is the recent concept I was playing with a little bit, because as part of the Institute for Entrepreneurship, we're comprised of these really seasoned CEOs to come and have a home for growth. And we want them to grow. And we have a community of people with very expensive knowledge versus just knowledge, meaning expensive knowledge. I think a combat veteran has very expensive knowledge. What did they have to go through to learn what they know? And there is no harder job in business than being, than owning one, than being the CEO of a growing business. It's a really hard thing. And there is such a price to pay, psychologically, physically. As you grow, that's another challenge of growth. As you grow, something always gives. Relationships, health, whatever, something's going to give. And that's a real expensive price to pay to grow something that matters. And that's an expensive tab. So some people say college is expensive. It's like, yeah, not as expensive as the education that some of these CEOs have had, right? Or the education that you've had to have to build what you've created, right?
Yeah.
That's expensive knowledge.
Well, let's talk about the Institute because I've been with you for, I think it's been going on 2 years now, and I love this community that you've created. Tell people how that came about and what you guys are doing.
Well, I fell in love with what entrepreneurship can do to change lives. And doing that in an academic setting and with students, very fulfilling, very wonderful. Where would a CEO go to come grow? Where would somebody like you go? You're probably not going to go to University of Georgia to say, hey, how do I get better at this skill of scaling a business, of owning a business, of creating something great? And what if we could create a home for those types of people? And then in return for their membership in that organization, they help create a legacy in somebody else, that next generation of CEO. So, having people like you and others come and having a home to grow themselves, grow their company, grow their leaders, and then grow their legacy. And there's several ways we can define legacy. One of them certainly is, hey, let me pay you a premium for what you started at your kitchen table. Like, I want to pay you a premium. I want to please let me pay you a lot of money so that I can continue what you started. That's one version of legacy. But more importantly to me is legacy is what we leave in people sometimes, not necessarily what we leave for people. And say, hey, and also because of you, there's this one student that's going to have uncommon access to something, and we're going to change the student's life. And so the idea of having the CEOs become the faculty, the mentors, the advisors for this next generation of folks who are trying to figure it out and pouring into the young people. I get such a joy out of that. So the idea of hopefully having a 1-to-1 ratio of, hey, we've got 100 CEOs, 100 students. And then also having a place, so we're basically it's comprised of, CEOs who want to grow, students who want to grow, middle school, high school, and college age students. And then also, that was planned for. What was not planned for was doing all the work with leaders that we do. Because one of the biggest bottlenecks to growth is growing leadership teams, right? Underdeveloped leaders. We're all underdeveloped. I think we're all not to the level that our potential, I think that we have a limited potential as leaders. And so we're all arguably underdeveloped. Having a place where those leadership teams can come and really grow. Not in a commoditized MBA type of format where, hey, we have to teach these courses or else we're not accredited. But hey, a leadership program that's accredited and endorsed by CEOs and say, hey, these are the things that have grown my leadership teams. Why don't you try this? And so really having that intentional focus and giving space for that growth. Because I also think that one of the reasons we don't grow is we don't have the space for growth. So creating space for somebody like you to come on a consistent basis to grow, having a place for leaders to come and grow on a consistent basis, and having a place for students to come and grow on a consistent basis. Because one thing I've learned about performance is the biggest drivers of performance is consistency and accountability. So if you know that we're meeting every Tuesday and you know that I'm going to ask you this question, it will drive performance, right? So having that as a sort of a flywheel, to use that term.
Well, the accountability part, even if you're wanting to get in shape, just having a partner keeping you accountable.
Absolutely. And great growth is done together, right?
Right.
And it's done in community. And I also think when we can, we want to do it in person. Virtual is okay. But I also don't think Marine Corps boot camp will ever be virtual. Even though I bet you could design a program that could work, but it will never be done because great growth is done together. It's done over meals. It's done over drinks. It's, hey, I'm really struggling with blank. That has to be done together.
And there can be a lot of blanks in there as we go around our table, and it's
absolutely.
But there's very valuable information. People ask, I'm having issues with accounting. I really need a new accountant. I've heard that before. Or a lot of struggles that folks deal with in their businesses is like pricing their services. For us, trying to price content, I always say, if someone might come to me and say, I want to make a commercial. What's that cost? I'm like, okay, well, do you want like the car dealership commercial you see every night, or what commercial do you like? Oh, I really like this commercial I saw during the Super Bowl. Okay, well, there's a difference between $5,000 and millions of dollars in that 30-second spot. Yeah. So it's very hard because everything's customized. But what kind of advice can you share to our listeners when it comes to pricing services?
Price is a story that we tell ourselves about value. It's just a story. I don't have any idea about what you do, if it's fairly priced, too expensive, or too low. The only thing I can do is compare it to others, right? And that's a data point, but it's just a data point. When value exceeds price, a sale always occurs. So I may pay a lot for something, but as long as I, in my mind, am certain that I'll get more than what I pay, because price is what I pay, value is what I get. I want to get more than what I pay. That's when we make a transaction. That's when I buy a product or service. I see more value in that product. I see more value in that service than the money I have in my wallet, than they're asking. I'll buy it. And there's some things we go, yeah, that's too much money. I don't see the value. To me, price exceeds value in this circumstance. So we, as business owners, have to tell We have to create value. We have to communicate value in a way to our target customers that price, while it may be high, you're going to get so much more than you pay. There's more value in what I'm giving you. I will make your life better. And we tend to tell the story of price sometimes in the features. Like, look how long we've been in business and look at all our accomplishments. And that's where we sell the features. But more compellingly, it's the benefit to the person. This is going to change your life in this way. This is why your life is better because I just walked into it. Now, the features back up the benefit. And by the way, it's going to be safe because we've been around for this long, or we can deliver our promise. So the idea of having a promise that's compelling, a guarantee that's compelling, in a way that makes that customer, whoever we're focused on, feel certain that I'm going to get more than what I pay for.
Well, speaking of value and telling the story about price, obviously that is what we do. This podcast is called Create Your News, and that goes into kind of shaping the narrative for your business, but also you as a CEO or you as an entrepreneur. What kind of advice can you give these entrepreneurs, CEOs who are running these businesses to really take control of their story to grow their business? Because every business has a story. That's where we come in. We want to tell your story. Why do you do what you do? Yeah. What's different about you than the next person out there? So what kind of advice can you give those folks who are listening about shaping their own narratives?
I'll start with a very general piece of advice that applies not just in this context, but in several others. Isolation is the enemy of excellence. I'm an introverted guy. I didn't understand that before, that I felt pride in going it alone, doing it myself. I can Google an article about how to tell my own story or develop a narrative. I can maybe shoot my own video. I'll figure it out. That's the enemy of excellence. Something like this, you can't do this in isolation. You need outside eyes because none of us have the ability to see our businesses from an outside perspective. Somebody who first interacts with your business for the very first time, what is that experience like? We don't know, but the problem is we think we know because we've been doing our businesses for a long time. So getting somebody else to help you with that narrative, because what we think is important, we may be wrong. We have the curse of knowledge on that. We've been dealing with our customers so long that we assume knowledge when maybe we don't. We're assuming that this is a pain point when maybe it's not. We're assuming that this is a compelling story. I want to talk to you about all the awards that I won as an entrepreneur. I want to tell you all about my academic experience as an entrepreneur. It's like, yeah, what if the customer doesn't care? Well, what does the customer care about? And people who are experts in story, because marketing is a story as well, right? Marketing is creating the conditions for a story to spread. I want a story to spread. How do I create that conditions? Well, I got to tell a story that's compelling, that somebody can remember and take with them and tell others about. Well, I can't do that because I'm going to go on way too long about it because I want to tell you everything about my business because I find it fascinating. You don't. From the outside, a customer doesn't. How does this change my life really? And having an expert who can navigate that, because storytelling is a really hard thing, right? It's hard to get to a story that is compelling, a story where I'm riveted. Attention is such a precious resource, and I have very, very finite amount of it. And having an expert who can tell me a story that I want to pay attention to, right, that I want to remember, tell me more about that. That's an art. And you guys do that art very, very well. So that's why, I think having somebody like you and your organization do that, that's really powerful versus me going in and doing it in isolation, which is the enemy of excellence.
I mean, it's music to my ears right there. Because I say that all the time. We'll might do a pitch and they'll say, well, we already have a marketing department. They're already pushing out videos. And I'm like, we'll complement your marketing department because we are the outsiders looking in. And we always say, well, just let us stock your grocery store shelves full of content because we can take an outsider's approach and really find out what is resonating with us as outsiders, and then let's deliver that to your potential customers.
Absolutely, and there's a saying in the venture capital community that an entrepreneur can never pitch his own deal or his or her own deal, and I think there's truth to that because again, I need help. I need how did that come across? Because I'm assuming that when I said this part, this was the best part. This was the part that was going to really capture you. And you're like, yeah, that part didn't resonate with me at all. I felt that part wasn't important at all. So yeah, it's very story, the art of communicating the value that I provide, the art of telling my own story is something that I think all of us need a lot of help with.
More to that theme, how important is it for personal branding? We talked about it a little bit, but how important it is for these CEOs and these entrepreneurs to really put themselves out there. You know, you look at this day and age, everybody's a content creator. And if you're not injecting yourself in the conversation and you're not showing them your expertise, explain to us maybe how you've taught students and other CEOs and entrepreneurs about how important it is for them to put themselves out there and do some personal branding, which in turn will help their business or their nonprofit.
Yeah, brand is, the way I define it or think about it, is what we say about you when you're not in the room. You know, like if I was going to talk about you, and I do talk about you to the other CEOs that we serve, because you're an intimate, a very important part of our community, and I will talk about you, but I don't talk about you in the way that your website reflects. I'm not going to use that kind of language, right? The analogy I like is like, imagine at a Sunday barbecue, you know, where people feel safe and they're with friends, what would they say really? As opposed to what is the company mission statement that I memorized and the company vision statement that I memorized. And, you know, I don't want people to necessarily at the barbecue to pull up a website. I want them to tell me something from their heart, from, you know, like in real language. What is that? And I like that as a starting point. What would I want people to say? Maybe they're not going to say it, but what would I want people to say? And how do I do like so how do I start acting like that? How do I start getting maybe my content providers and expertise like yours in helping me achieve that? You know, because we will remember very few things about you, right? There's a phrase that I read a long time ago that said, a great man is one sentence, meaning we can describe most great people in history in one sentence. We don't need a paragraph to describe the person. We can basically describe great people in one sentence. What's your one sentence? You know, what's the personal brand that you would want? And then having expertise in amplifying that is what we need, because I don't know how to get my personal brand. Is it important? Of course it is. But I need help in doing that. I need help in identifying what sets me apart. Because we don't want to argue for better sameness. I'm like everybody else. I'm the same as everybody else. I'm just better. No, there's got to be a unique voice and a unique story. Or as I like to describe a Seth Godin definition of business, business is the irrational pursuit of being irresistible. What makes you irresistible?
Great quotes right there. You know, we're running up here on time, but I literally could sit and talk with you for a very long time. But before we kind of wrap things up, you've led over, according to your LinkedIn, and I know it's more now, but 370 sessions with leadership teams. Do you have any favorite success stories that really stick out to you?
I do. But none that are I think story worthy, but some that mean a lot to me personally, like seeing the person tear up that you never thought would tear up when you finally get to the real issue. You know, I've never been a good actor. I want to be an actor, and sometimes leaders have to play a role when they show up. They have to act a certain way. They have to become, they're playing the role of chief operating officer, chief financial officer, or whatever it is. And then when you get to the, okay, this person, and we've gotten below, this is how he wants the world to perceive him, but now we're getting into the real. And once we get to the real, then we can start having real change. And so the stories of success for me is more of stories of transformation for those folks, right? That's powerful. I can point to metrics that make me sound better than I am. Like, okay, this leadership team that we've been working with for 5 years, they were doing this and now they're doing that in EBITDA, right? But I think that that's a little bit of adverse selection, because only great, leadership teams that are committed to being great are going to go through the rigor that we provide as far as developing leadership teams that outperform competition. So it's adverse selection, I think, a little bit. So the stories that really move me are the stories of real transformation, where you see people change and they're showing up differently, not only professionally, but also personally, right? It's like, hey, I'm a better father because of this. Those are the stories that really make me feel better and make me go to bed fulfilled at night.
You've touched up on so much, but what is really one piece of advice that you give every entrepreneur that you work with?
Well, I'll stick to the main theme. There's several, but isolation. Isolation is a really bad thing. That's the worst punishment that we give to people. If you're bad in prison, you go to solitary confinement. That's how we punish the worst offenders. Running a business is the most isolating. It's such an isolating job. It is. Nobody really understands that burden. And I think the advice that I would give if somebody's watching this or listening to this and they're running or leading a business, I would seek a community of people who understand that. Shared suffering creates a special connection and bond. And finding a community of people who are going through similar experiences can be very powerful. I did not understand that a long time ago. And I'm understanding it more and more every day, where I'm becoming more convicted that, wow, I wish I would have not taken pride in that rugged individualism, that I can do it on my own.
During our last Institute meeting, one quote you said that really resonated with me too was, aside from that part of isolation, but the quote was, we're at a stage where hard thinking beats hard work. Yeah. And it's great to get out there with all these CEOs and entrepreneurs and find out their struggles, how they overcame those struggles. But also it's very important for everybody in business and work in general to put the phone down and just think. Can you elaborate a little bit for those who were obviously not at that meeting?
Yeah, activity is an enemy. And we have to spend more time reflecting than we have to do, because like the person who's outthinking you is outworking you at this stage, right? Once you're up and running, you got cash flow and all that stuff. Yes, at the beginning of a business, hustle is important. But to grow a business, it's reflection plus experience that makes us better. It's not experience. We think I've been doing it longer, therefore I'm better. That is so false. And we know that, right? We know several people who have 20 years of experience, which is really just 1 year of experience repeated 20 times. It is reflection. Where do the best ideas come from for CEOs? Research is pretty clear. It's 3 places: bathroom, driving, exercise. Why? Because one of the few times we're not in front of a phone or we're not dealing with stomping out a fire, right? It's one of the few times we're alone and we get that reflection, that insight. That's so powerful, right? I have to be better at thinking than my competitor, right? Outthinking my competitor is outworking my competitor. So, hey, what's something I could do differently? What's something that I could do is there a small habit that we could start doing that would lead to a big breakthrough? What's possible? What has no one ever done before? Just questions like that to reflect on. Having a habit of doing that, or even better, a community of seasoned, been there, done that folks that you can do that with, so invaluable. We'll never know the company that we could have built if we would have done those kinds of things.
What's next for you and the Institute for Entrepreneurship?
We want to build the most transformational organization that exists in entrepreneurship. And we are not even close to that. How do we make sure that somebody comes to one of our events and they are fundamentally changed as a result of it? I know how to inform. I don't always know how to transform. And so we want to become transformational. So we're working really hard on becoming that. Comprised of seasoned CEOs, students, middle school, high school, and college age students, and then leaders. But we want to be known not for the information that we provide or the research that we do. We want to be known for the love and the impact and the transformation we have on the people that we serve within it. That's a really hard thing, and I'm not gifted at that, and we're trying to learn how to do that better and better.
Lastly, how can our listeners connect with you, learn more about you, learn more about the program?
So the website, which is Institute for ENTR, so FOR, ENTR.com. So Institute4ENTR.com is the website. Or as we connected on LinkedIn. So
That's right.
Christopher Hanks on LinkedIn. So that's how we initially met. So there you go.
That is. Well, Chris, thanks so much. You know, Professor Hanks, I could sit here all day long and listen. It's been amazing getting to know you more as a person. I appreciate all the help that you've given me, all of our colleagues in the group, and then also for our listeners. And to leave all of our listeners this one little sentence that you said, what is your one sentence? That's what it comes down to. You touched up on legacy and everything else. So thank you so much for joining us on our Create Your News podcast, Chris.
It is an honor. Thank you.
Inflator, man. I'll show you how to get more likes than Kylie on the ground. Inflator.